Part 79. Love is really a powerful thing. This passionate desire is awe-inspiring. Xuan Huaifeng hid in the bed, his nerves were tense, and it gradually became difficult to breathe. He was thinking about whether to sit up and negotiate with Bai Xuelan head-on when the savior came. A servant suddenly reported outside, "Chief, Dr. Kindle is here." Bai Xuelan said, "Come in quickly." Bai Xuelan hurried to the door to greet Dr. Kindle. Xuan Huaifeng was also surprised. Why did a foreign doctor come here? Could it be that Bai Xuelan ordered the servant outside the door just now to ask for a doctor? He secretly turned his head and glanced at the other side of the door, just in time to catch a glimpse of Bai Xuelan accompanying Dr. Kindle in a suit, and quickly turned his head back to pretend to sleep. Bai Xuelan entered the door, pointed to the person on the bed and said, "This is the patient. I know that hot water can disinfect. I have changed his clothes and wiped his body with hot water. But I don't know if it will help." For a while, as if something was blocking the way, I shifted my footsteps and said, "I accidentally dropped the medicine. There are many broken glasses on the ground, please be careful." "Ring the bell again." The servant hurried over to ask what instructions he had, and Bai Xuelan asked to clean the ground. The servant bent over to clean up quickly, while the other, Bai Xuelan, did not dare to delay and brought the doctor to the bedside. Dr. Kindle asked in half-baked Chinese, "May I ask what the symptoms are?" Bai Xuelan said in a deep voice, "I'm afraid it is a lung disease." Dr. Kindle said, "Is it a lung disease? It is very serious. I will examine the patient first." Bai Xuelan said cautiously, "Please check carefully, the medicine must be the best use, and I am not afraid of spending money here." After speaking, he let the doctor go to the foot of the bed, leaving a place for the doctor to work. Because of the examination, Xuan Huaifeng couldn't pretend to sleep again. He sat up and whispered to the doctor, "It's really not sick, this is his misunderstanding." Bai Xuelan's face sank, and he stopped him and said, "What do you know? It's not because you have no brains that you caused these things?" Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help being annoyed again, and looked at Bai Xuelan with dissatisfied eyes. Bai Xuelan also warned him with his eyes. Although Dr. Kindle is a foreigner, he also knows a little about the world. Besides, having practiced medicine in China for several years, he understands Chinese very well, but he does not speak smoothly. Looking at the situation of the two of them, I know that this is another example of the rich people who care and mess up. He smiled and said, "It doesn't matter, I will have an examination, and I will know." Please, since he made a special trip to invite someone to come here. Xuan Huaifeng was too embarrassed to embarrass him, so he leaned over and pulled the wide opening of the front of the pajamas, and asked him to put the stethoscope through the front. The earpiece of the metal stethoscope was pressed against his chest, and it was icy cold. Dr. Kindle listened to the chest for a while. Bai Xuelan stared at the expression on his face, and asked, "How is it?" Dr. Kindle shook his head and said, "Wait a minute." He moved the listening head, listened for a while, and then said to Xuan Huaifeng, "Please. You lift the back of the clothes. Then put the listening head into Xuan Huaifeng's back clothes, stick it on the back, move it a few places, and listen carefully for a long time." Then I picked up the stethoscope. Bai Xuelan asked, "What's the matter?" Dr. Kindle smiled and said, "Your friend has healthy lungs and no lung disease." Bai Xuelan said, "Have you checked clearly?" Dr. Kindle looked at him, and he didn't look good, so he naturally became cautious and said in a deep voice, "I'll take a look." Turning to Xuan Huaifeng, he said, "Excuse me." To Xuan Huaifeng unbuttoned the two buttons on the front of the pajamas, revealing a jade white and crystal clear chest. Bai Xuelan's face changed, and he suddenly remembered that this was a doctor examining a patient, so he had to endure it, and stared at it as if he was being whipped. Dr. Kindle put his left hand on Xuan Huaifeng's chest, curled the middle finger of his right hand, and tapped the knuckle of the middle finger of his left hand, listening while beating. After a long while, he took his hand back. Please. Xuan Huaifeng still buttoned the button, and said to Bai Xuelan, "The examination is clear. The lungs are healthy." Bai Xuelan said, "No, you can check it carefully again." Dr. Kindle was helpless. He had no choice but to ask Xuan Huaifeng questions such as, "Do you have a cough? Do you have chest pains?" Xuan Huaifeng shook his head and said no. Dr. Kindle stretched out his hand to probe his forehead again and said, "You don't have a fever." Turning his head back, he said solemnly to Bai Xuelan, "I have been treating people for more than 10 years, and I have only seen a pulmonary specialist. This mister does not have lung disease." Bai Xuelan was paranoid today, still saying, "He has just been in the hospital with a lung disease patient for a long time, and I am afraid he has already contracted it. I know that this disease is caused by bacteria. It's the most contagious." Dr. Kindle thought about it and asked, "May I ask what kind of lung disease the patient has? If it's tuberculosis, you need to be more careful." Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but say, "My friend's lungs are inflamed due to colds, and the constitution is not good, so the cough is weak. The examination in the hospital is definitely not tuberculosis." Bai Xuelan insisted, "Even if it is not tuberculosis, other pneumonias will kill people." Dr. Kindle has generally understood and said with a smile, "This person thinks about pneumonia too terribly. Ordinary pneumonia is only a coccus infection. The cocci have weak vitality and are not easily transmitted to visitors. If it is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, it will be different. The transmission power of Mycobacterium tuberculosis is different. And this gentleman on the bed, I have already checked, and there is really nothing wrong with him now." Xuan Huaifeng said, "There is nothing wrong with me." Glancing at Bai Xuelan, "There is something wrong, probably this one." However, Bai Xuelan refused to take a break, and said solemnly, "You can't see the problem now. If it only shows up in a few days, what should I do? You are a doctor, and you must always prescribe some preventive medicine. Otherwise, if he has something when things get up, I'm going to find you." Xuan Huaifeng was both angry and funny. This man is stubborn and arrogant. Facing the doctor, he also had the tone of a robber who only respected him. After all, he is someone who has studied in France. So why is he so stubborn on this issue? But after looking at the pneumonia patients, it was as if they were facing a great enemy. Their concepts were as backward as the suspicious old people in the countryside, and they didn't know what science was. Thankfully, he also talked to himself about Darwinian evolution. On carnivores and vegetarians. It was so rigid at heart. Dr. Kindle also had a headache when he encountered this demon king, and he knew that he was not to be offended. So he had no choice but to nagging, explaining to him for a long time in tongue-in-cheek Chinese, and talking about a lot of professional terms such as bacterial infection. Bai Xuelan waved his hand, stopped him and said, "I don't care. In short, you have to give him some medicine to keep him from contracting lung disease. Aren't you a famous foreign expert in the city who sees lung disease? You can prescribe any medicine. I'll double the consultation fee." Dr. Kindle couldn't, so he had to prescribe some vitamins and other medicines. Bai Xuelan then let him go, and before leaving, he said to the doctor, "If he is feeling unwell recently, I will definitely ask someone to invite you. No matter how busy you are, please take care of me first." Dr. Kindle said, "Certainly. Definitely." With a wry smile, he put on his bowler hat, took double the consultation fee, and left with a small medicine box. Dr. Kindle left, and the room was quiet again. After all this, Xuan Huaifeng realized that Bai Xuelan used a hot towel to scald him, so he wanted to disinfect him for fear of him contracting pneumonia. This move can be said to be caring, but also ignorant and ridiculous. Hot water disinfection mentioned in foreign magazines refers to boiled water. What can this hot towel do? But Bai Xuelan's original intention out of concern is for sure, that is, it is too dictatorial, and it was too hot just now. Xuan Huaifeng pondered for a while, and felt that Bai Xuelan was between being blamed and not being blamed, while he was between being angry and not angry. This kind of situation is neither loud nor harmonious. And the top and bottom are not over. It was embarrassing and uncomfortable, the aftermath lingered, and it was sticky and unpleasant like stepping on glue. Between him and Bai Xuelan, there have been big fights, and mild harmoniousness has naturally also had it. But there has never been such a time when it is sticky, and it is impossible to distinguish right from wrong. For a while, I felt very troubled. Looking up, I saw from the window that Bai Xuelan, who had sent the doctor out, was coming back here from a distance. After a while, when he heard footsteps, Xuan Huaifeng knew that Bai Xuelan had returned to the room, but he was lying with his back to him. He didn't know what Bai Xuelan was doing behind him, but he didn't say a word. The atmosphere in the room was strangely quiet and depressing. It didn't take long for someone to come in again, probably someone like a servant, followed by a rustling sound. And a scent of aroma floated in the air, which went straight into his nose, making Xuan Huaifeng feel hungry. Suddenly I remembered that I didn't have lunch today. Bai Xuelan was actually very attentive to himself. Thinking back on it, it gave birth to a bit of warmth. He knew that Bai Xuelan was very concerned about his own eating. And he was always afraid that he would be hungry, and he was used to Bai Xuelan urging him to eat, so he lay on the bed and waited sweetly with a hint of shyness. After waiting for a long time, the sound of placing the dishes stopped early, and I heard the door squeak again. It seems that the servant has also left and closed the door, but Bai Xuelan has not yet spoken. Only then did Xuan Huaifeng realize that they were arguing childishly like an ordinary couple. How could he still act according to his usual thoughts? It was embarrassing. Thinking about how to return to peace with Bai Xuelan. Turning around, he was startled. There was no sign of Bai Xuelan. He was the only one left in the room. Xuan Huaifeng was stunned for a moment. Only then did he know that Bai Xuelan had already left at an unknown time. It was ridiculous that he still made so many useless struggles. He raised his lips and smiled lightly. The bottom of his heart was empty, and there was a trace of bleak smoke escaping from the emptiness. He got out of bed by himself, shoved his shoes to the small round table separated by a screen, and saw that a large bowl of porridge with mushrooms and minced meat, 4 plates of freshly fried light dishes, and a small plate of pickled cucumbers were exactly what he liked. Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help but sighed silently. I sat down, filled a bowl of porridge in a small enamel bowl on the table, took 2 sips, and it was very comfortable to drink hot. It's just that something in his heart has affected his appetite. He felt hungry just now, but now he feels full after drinking a bowl of porridge. He stared at the dishes on the table for a while, thinking that it was Bai Xuelan for him. I didn't want to live up to what I was instructed to do, so I picked up the chopsticks, forced 2 of them into my mouth, and chewed slowly. It tastes like chewing wax. It was the first time that I felt so lonely and uncomfortable eating alone. Thinking again, Bai Xuelan deliberately left him out, probably because he declared his position. He will definitely follow him in the future, so Bai Xuelan has the capital to neglect him. Does it mean that the current situation is actually self-inflicted? It can be seen that love is really a powerful thing. If I hadn't fallen in love with this demon king, I wouldn't worry about gains and losses like this. And my heart hurts and itches like being scratched by a cat. Xuan Huaifeng smiled bitterly and patted his forehead lightly with his palm. Why bother to come? He shouldn't be so self-pity. He didn't eat a meal together, and he was so sad for the spring and autumn. This is not a matter of the stage. Thinking of the stage, I couldn't help but turn my thoughts to Bai Xuelan. Although he is not an emotional genius, he can also see that Bai Xuelan's heart is actually mostly placed on Bai Xuelan. Compared with Bai Xuelan, I am much happier. Now that I get along with Bai Xuelan day and night, and have a serious job as an adjutant, I am still dissatisfied with complaining about this and that. What if I live with Bai Xuelan in different places? Instead, he felt a little guilty. When you are in the midst of blessings, you should cherish the blessings. How can you feel resentment over small things? Thinking of this, I felt a little more relaxed. After eating the porridge, he didn't go back to bed, and waited for Bai Xuelan in the room. It was boring to wait, and he didn't know when Bai Xuelan would come back. Take it and see. While taking a pear that was washed clean from the crystal plate, he leaned against the small reclining chair by the bed, watching while eating. Bai Xuelan left the room silently. First, because he really had business to do when he was sending the doctor out. He received a call from the Prime Minister's office. There was an urgent matter to deal with. As soon as Xuan Huaifeng airs, let's see how Xuan Huaifeng reacts. He hadn't forgotten that Xuan Huaifeng had just put on a Cold War stance. If you tolerate this person too much and develop the habit of fighting with yourself at every turn in the future, it will be very bad. It's just that he wanted to hang on to others, but he was impatient. He hurriedly wrote the official document instructed by his cousin Prime Minister in the study, and asked Adjutant's son to sign it out immediately. He put the exquisite foreign pen on the table and couldn't help it. Just remembered the one in the room. The meals that the kitchen was instructed to prepare must have been delivered to the room. I don't know if he ate it or not. Do you feel angry when you find yourself leaving without saying hello to him? Or sad and aggrieved, if he gets anxious and comes to the study to quarrel with him? Should he coax him or scold him? According to the stupid things he did, regardless of his own body, he went to sit in the ward of a pneumonia patient. Not only should he be scolded, but he should be beaten. However, I used a hot towel to wipe his body in front of him. He had already burned him, and it was a lesson to him. And looking at his eyes, don't say he was wrong. I'm afraid he would even lose his temper. Bai Xuelan smiled helplessly. He remembered that he glanced at him when he left. Xuan Huaifeng was still lying on the bed pretending to be asleep. This man was stubborn. If the food was delivered, he was sulking and couldn't get up to eat. Wouldn't he be starving? It's okay to starve him for a meal. Hateful enough. Adjutant's son signed the document and transferred it back. Standing at the door of the study, he saw Bai Xuelan sitting in front of the desk, leaning back on the chair, and staring at the ceiling in a trance. After a while, Bai Xuelan didn't realize that he was here. So Adjutant's son couldn't help laughing and said, "Chief, those two official documents won't work anymore." Bai Xuelan heard the words and looked down, only to realize that he had taken 2 document papers at some point and rubbed them absent-mindedly. He smiled and put down the document and said, "I don't know what happened today, but I'm always a little silly when I do things." Adjutant's son said, "It's a good thing to be a little silly every now and then. You're too wise, and you've never made a single mistake. The golden body of a bodhisattva shines brightly. Those of us below are frightened in our hearts. Yes, I just came back, and when I passed your house, I saw Adjutant Xuan working hard inside." When Bai Xuelan heard the words, Adjutant Xuan, he was more energetic than taking a panacea. But he refused to show any expression on his face, coughed, and said indifferently, "Don't play tricks in front of me." Sign the documents and go forward. The room in the back, the road doesn't pass by, you have something to do in a big circle around the mansion before you come and talk. Are you trying to delay my work? What kind of work is he using? Adjutant's son said, I was just passing by, and I was far away through the window. When I saw a shadow, it seemed like he was reading. Bai Xuelan asked, have he eaten yet? Adjutant's son shook his head, I don't know. After this conversation, Bai Xuelan couldn't help it anymore. He was reading a book, so his strategy to hang him was useless. But he was happy to be alone. Bai Xuelan was a little unwilling. This lord is scratching his head here, but you are very happy. In any case, this hateful person can't be relieved. This time, I found an excuse to go back to my room. He immediately stood up and said to Adjutant's son, I'm doing things here, and he's going to read books in a leisurely manner. How can it be so cheap? I'll go and order him to do official business, and let him, the adjutant, know some of his duties. Holding the documents on the desk in a bag, he strode towards the back room. When I got to the door, I sneaked a peek, and sure enough, Xuan Huaifeng was holding a half-eaten pear in one hand and flipping through the office documents of the General Administration of Customs in the other. The sunlight came in from the window, imprinting half of his cheeks, highlighting the delicate bridge of his nose and the corners of his lips. The other half was leaning on the long reclining chair, and his two long legs were slightly crossed on the side of the chair. Seeing this scene, Bai Xuelan suddenly lost most of his thoughts of teaching a hard lesson. After a moment's daze at the door, he stepped in, walked in very calmly, and asked, what are you looking at? Have you eaten yet? Why only eat so little? As he passed the small round table, he glanced at the vegetables and porridge left on it. He thought that after what happened just now, Xuan Huaifeng might still be angry and want to make trouble with himself. At this time, he didn't want to quarrel, so his tone and expression became more and more natural, as if nothing had happened. Unexpectedly, Xuan Huaifeng could put it down better than him. He heard him speak, put down the document he was seeing halfway through, raised his head to look at him, and said, I'm full, and I'm going to have some fruit after eating. It's you who went there just now. Where is it? Why didn't you see you in the room all of a sudden? Bai Xuelan was embarrassed to bring up the matter of hanging him, and said, of course, I went to work. Xuan Huaifeng asked, what are you holding in your hand? Bai Xuelan said, we have to do official business. When he left the study, he actually had a bit of an indescribable thought, and planned that if Xuan Huaifeng was not obedient, he would take these documents and put them on the shelf of his boss to suppress the whole thing. God made him frightened. Never thought that Xuan Huaifeng would be so easy to get along with. I was about to say, official work for you, but when it came to my lips, I couldn't help but become official work for us. Sounds very intimate. When Xuan Huaifeng heard that it was official business, he immediately became serious, put his feet down from the long reclining chair, sat upright, and said, let me see, there are so many copies. So we can sort them one by one first. Bai Xuelan looked at it. With those beautiful and long legs hanging down, most of them were covered by the Wanghuali small coffee table in front. And I cried out in my heart. He sat side by side with Xuan Huaifeng on the chair that Xuan Huaifeng had put his legs on, and put the pile of documents he was holding on the coffee table. Xuan Huaifeng picked up a few copies, and asked casually, the Prime Minister has handed over the drafting of the articles to our customs? I thought it was a matter of the National Police Agency. Bai Xuelan had seen those documents before, but he didn't look at the documents at all. He put it up, only staring at Xuan Huaifeng's handsome face. This beautiful face became serious, with a dazzling light, which made his heart itch again and again, and replied, the police department can't do this. The Prime Minister also understands the matter, so he left it to me. He asked again, is the fragrant pear delicious? Xuan Huaifeng said, it's delicious, do you want it? There are still clean ones in the plate. If you want to eat it, Before he could finish speaking, Bai Xuelan came over and shook his hand. He grabbed his right wrist holding the pear and took a bite on the half of the pear he had left. A crisp sound. Xuan Huaifeng frowned and said, you're too greedy, I've bitten it. So unsanitary. Bai Xuelan asked back, you're paying attention to hygiene with me now? That's close to a pneumonia patient, isn't it? What about hygiene? Xuan Huaifeng said, I plan to relax. But you don't let it go, do you? Well, let me ask you, Bai Yunfei is my friend, isn't he your friend? Your friend is sick, you just avoid him like the plague? I went to see him and came back to tell you the truth. You don't care about his life or death, you only care about whether he is infected or not. It's really chilling. What pears to eat? Don't forget me and pneumonia. The patient has been there together, and this saliva is also filled with bacteria, and I can't bear the sin for you, the chief, after being sick. The more he said, the more angry he became. With a thud, I threw half of the pears in my hand into the scrap basket. Bai Xuelan mentioned this sentence inadvertently, the black eyes flashed a fierce light. Grabbing Xuan Huaifeng's chin, he twisted his 2 fingers hard to his side, not allowing him to turn his face towards him, and said in a heart-pounding tone, I don't care about his life or death. Wrong person. I should have cared about Bai Yunfei. Also, compared to others, Bai Yunfei is much better, at least he knows what is good, he is not a bastard. If he is good to him, he will at least know how grateful he is. Xuan Huaifeng said, yes, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to be grateful. You are a bastard, why are you dragging me? You let go. Bai Xuelan sneered, don't even think about it. Seeing that Xuan Huaifeng wanted to fight back, he simply retracted his arms, hugged Xuan Huaifeng, and pressed his own weight on the long reclining chair, turning into a very ambiguous and dangerous posture. Xuan Huaifeng said sharply, Bai Xuelan, you dare to mess around. Bai Xuelan hummed. Don't you feel cold? I'll keep you warm. Holding him, he rubbed his face against Xuan Huaifeng's neck and licked his tongue against the sensitive skin on the back of the neck. Xuan Huaifeng was shivering from his licking, angry and ashamed, and scolded, you bastard. Bai Xuelan said, it's just right, you bastard, I'm an asshole, a couple. He opened his white teeth. Biting on the slender and tender neck, Xuan Huaifeng groaned in pain. Xuan Huaifeng said, you're crazy again? Do you think I really won't be angry? Bai Xuelan said, I think you won't be angry. I like you, so I can't help bullying you like this. Xuan Huaifeng was pressed by him, like a mountain on his body, he couldn't breathe, his cheeks were dizzy due to embarrassment, while pushing his shoulders, he asked fiercely. Will you talk about it reasonably? Bai Xuelan said, don't tell me. I'm not a robber, have you ever seen a rational robber? Bai Xuelan, only say that a white knife goes in. And a red knife goes out. Another bite made Xuan Huaifeng gasp in pain. Bai Xuelan whispered viciously, let you run around. One more mouthful. Let you go to the pneumonia ward. Still a mouthful. Let you run the hot water faucet. Take another sip. Let you fight me in a cold war. One more mouthful. I will bite you to death. Xuan Huaifeng turned his head vigorously. Unable to escape the sharp-toothed wolf's mouth, feeling that half of his neck had been gnawed, he turned his head sharply, stared directly at the brutal handsome face of Bai Xuelan who was close at hand, and said angrily, don't go too far. If you keep doing this, I'll. Thinking of himself like this. He couldn't do it even if he struggled, saying that he would beat him, this kind of threat is very untenable. Seeing him annoyed, Bai Xuelan found it interesting and asked him, how about you? Xuan Huaifeng was overwhelmed by him, so he blurted out, "I will bite you." Bai Xuelan was stunned, full of anger, and almost rolled off him with laughter, saying, "You bite. You bite. I'll see if you have the ability to bite." Xuan Huaifeng was hot and cold by this lunatic. The tossing was almost breathless, and he said with a straight face, "Don't laugh." Bai Xuelan asked with great interest, "If I tell you that you are not allowed to do, but you ignore it? You don't allow me to laugh, why should I listen to it?" Xuan Huaifeng said, "You don't allow that. You are interfering with my personal freedom." Bai Xuelan asked back, "Isn't laughter my personal freedom? Bickering is asking for trouble," and he said angrily, "You are just unreasonable." Bai Xuelan said, "You can be reasonable, you can tell me to listen to it, and don't allow me to laugh. Does this count as interfering with personal freedom?" Xuan Huaifeng was too lazy to pay attention to him, closed his eyes, turned his face away, and stated that I would not see him with you. Bai Xuelan didn't care if Xuan Huaifeng didn't answer. He crouched on top of the nephrite jade warm incense, rubbing and biting just now. The awe-inspiring below had already swollen and hardened. In a moment of passion, he lowered his head to kiss Xuan Huaifeng's cheek, moved slowly over the soft cheek, kissed the corner of his beautiful mouth, and then kissed the two soft red lips. Xuan Huaifeng's lips were pried open, and he could not help but open his eyes when he sensed that the other party's soft and hard tongue came in like aggression. Looking at the passionate desire in Bai Xuelan's eyes, he knew what he was going to do. After a long French kiss, the man's hand had already touched the bottom of the pajamas. Xuan Huaifeng felt dizzy from the kiss, and felt soft all over. It was inevitable that he had difficulty breathing, but he always felt that something was wrong, and he was clearly arguing. How did he turn the situation over with a rogue means? In a hoarse voice, he said in a low voice, "It's not so rude. The reason is not clear." Bai Xuelan deliberately pressed his firm chest against him, rubbing each other through the cloth, and asked with a smirk, "Food sex also, what Confucius said. This truth is still unclear? You can't ask for it, you toss and turn. Look, when I ask, you toss and turn on the reclining chair. Reasonable, can you speak to me?" Before Xuan Huaifeng could reply, the wolf kissed him again, tightly blocking his mouth, biting his tongue and chewing his lips, like a gust of wind passing through the border, but he was sturdy and had unbearable momentum. Xuan Huaifeng's brain was like ice cream put into a hot pot, and it turned into a pool of sweet juice. In a daze, he felt that his lower body pajamas were pulled open. His thighs were being caressed eagerly, and the hot palms slid up along the inner thighs the more he felt. The last minute, the heart beats a minute faster, and the brain is poisoned with sweetness. He should resist. This man is clearly a rogue robber, doing things in a mess, rampant and domineering. He should resist. The man himself knew that the truth was unreasonable. And he turned his attention away when he couldn't deal with it, and wanted to be aggressive. He should resist.